at the Baltimore Ravens and find out what did they do to try and improve their roster during the 2018 offseason. Remember, this includes both free agency and the draft. First, let's look at their cap situation. At the beginning of the offseason, they had $12 million in cap space, and by the beginning of August, after the draft and free agency, they had about $12.4 million in cap space. So not much change there, but that must mean that they let a few guys go, in addition to possibly bringing over a couple of new guys. So let's take a look and see who were some of the guys that they let go. First, let me go through the guys that at the beginning of the offseason I thought might get let go. Okay, and let's see what really happened. Jeremy Maclin, that was a guy that I had my eye on that would probably not be back in 2018. You can see he had a big year there in Philadelphia after coming back from the knee injury. 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, huge numbers. Went and signed a deal with Kansas City, had 1,000 yards his first season and 8 touchdowns. Another big season. Then in 2016, you can see he didn't actually play in 165 games. He played in 16 games, but he had played in 12 games there in 2016 in Kansas City. Had 536 yards. Not bad. Okay, not bad, but that's a pretty significant drop-off. His receiving yards dropped in half. And then finally, in 2017, he signs with Baltimore and puts up 440 yards. All right, so that just didn't justify paying him $5 million a year to only put up 440 yards. So that was kind of a no-brainer for a guy who's going to be 30, this coming season. So Jeremy Maclin will not be back with the Ravens next season. Danny Woodhead is another guy that was a possible cut in my eyes, and in fact, they did let him go. He had missed the first half of the season with a hamstring injury, and then put up pretty, weak numbers, 56 yards rushing, did a little better, catching the ball out of the backfield, 200 yards receiving, but he's only played in 10 games in the last 2 years. He's 33 years old, and they were able to save $2 million by releasing him. So that was another pretty obvious choice. Looking at Ladarius Webb, that was another guy I thought might get let go. He was falling down the depth chart, 33 years old, and they were able to save another $1 million in cap space. So just letting those 3 guys go, they were able to pick up, about $8 million in cap space. Brashad Perriman is just got one foot out the door. They haven't let him go yet. But, 77 yards receiving last year in 11 games in his third year after being drafted in the first round. That is not even in the universe of what you're looking for. Even his best season, which was his second year, 499 yards, it's not bad, but it's still not that great either for a guy that you spent a first-round pick on. So, he's set to make over $1 million this season, and then what happened in the preseason game, again, the first preseason game against the Bears, he misses a ball that was thrown right into his hand, and then it pops up and gets intercepted. So Brashad Perriman is in bad shape if he's hoping to make this team, but we'll see. Ravens haven't cut him yet. Now let's look at the guys who were actually free agents. First on the offense. Ryan Jensen, that was a big name. Okay, it was his first year starting the season as the center after the Ravens traded Jeremy Zutta. Okay, that's the guy that had been their center for the last few years. he played on a restricted free agent tender worth $1.7 million, and Tampa Bay gave him 40 years and $42 million. I mean, Jensen played very well last year, but the Ravens just couldn't really afford to match 4 years and $42 million, and so they let him walk. But that it's a loss for sure, because he played very, very well. But you only have so much money with a hard cap in the NFL, and they just decided that they couldn't afford to keep him. Terrence West is another guy that was a free agent this year. I did not think he was going to make it. He was playing on a one-year tender as well, also worth $1.7 million. But he was behind both Alex Collins and Javorius Allen, who were both cheaper. So it made sense. Why pay a guy a little bit more when he's number 3 on the depth chart to begin with? The Saints signed Terrence West because Mark Ingram is suspended for the first, I think, 4 games of the year. So the Saints are going to give him a chance to see if he can, make the roster there. Mike Wallace was another name. Big name free agent, in my opinion. I mean, he's 32 years old, or he'll be 32 years old this season, but, still, he was the number 1 wide receiver for Baltimore last year. He had 1,000 yards receiving in 2016, still had 748 yards last year with 4 touchdowns. He was the best receiver the Ravens had, and he had a pretty, good value deal. 2 years, averaging $5.75 million. That's not bad for a guy that picked up, 1,000 yards one season and almost 750 the next. So Ravens got good value out of him, but he won't be back. And it's interesting, the Ravens had $12 million, I think, in cap space, and he signed a 1-year, $2.5 million deal with Philadelphia. You have to wonder, what kind of offer did Baltimore make, if any? Yeah, he's getting older. Yeah, his numbers are starting to drop, but shoot, 748 yards. There aren't a ton of guys in the NFL that get 748 yards. But maybe Mike Wallace preferred to, try to win a Super Bowl. That's definitely probable, or possible at least. So, it'd be interesting to see, what kind of offer did Baltimore make, if any, to try to keep him. But Mike Wallace won't be back with the Ravens next year. Benjamin Watson is another guy that won't be back, and another old veteran. He's going to be 38 this season. He had led the team in receptions, so you can see that Mike Wallace led the team in yards, 748, but he only had 52 catches. He's more of a deep threat kind of a guy compared to Benjamin Watson, who had 61 catches. He finished a 2-year, $7 million deal, and he elected to go to New Orleans and play for 1 year and $2 million. So we'll see how much he's able to contribute there in New Orleans. But he played with New Orleans before, and the last time he played in New Orleans, he had 825 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, he was a little younger at that time. He was 36 instead of 38. Or actually, I think he was 35 instead of 38. But he was still, not a spring chicken. So we'll see. New Orleans is a very creative offense, and that Sean Payton is really likes to use tight ends, and we'll see what he's able to do at 38 years old, but he won't be doing it with the Ravens. Another couple of offensive free agents that are worth noting. Michael Campanaro, okay, he's a guy who contributed last season, had 173 yards. Not huge, but still, he had 19 catches. And he finished up his rookie contract after being drafted in the 7th round. And he ended up with a 1-year, $835,000 deal with Tennessee. So, not a bad deal, not a huge deal, but he was able to get a little bit of money from Tennessee. James Hurst was a guy who, I thought might be able to get paid by somebody, and in fact he did, and that somebody was Baltimore. And he played really well last season. And he's an interesting guy, because he was undrafted out of North Carolina, had played some at tackle, but was terrible. He was best known for giving up a sack to Flacco, where Flacco ended up getting injured. And but he played so well at guard last year, on a 1-year tender worth $1.2 million, that the Ravens decided to bring him back for 4 years and $17.5 million. It's a big raise for James Hurst. And it'll be interesting to see where do the Ravens try to play him. Because they actually have pretty good players at guard that will be back this year. So do they try to move him back to tackle where he struggled before, or do they keep him at guard? It'll be interesting to see what happens to James Hurst. Who are the defensive unrestricted free agents? Well, Brent Urban, he was an unrestricted free agent, finished up his rookie contract after being drafted in the 4th round. He's just played in 25 games in 4 seasons. It's not a lot. Only 3 games last season. But the Ravens decided he had a lot of talent, and they're going to bring him back for a 1-year deal worth $1.1 million. So let's look at all of the major changes that have happened on the Ravens roster. First, at quarterback, Ryan Mallett is out as the backup to Joe Flacco. And they brought in Lamar Jackson in the 1st round and also brought in Robert Griffin. So, I don't know, Lamar Jackson, that will be interesting to see how that works out. He played all right in the preseason game against the Bears. He did throw an interception, though. He's an interesting guy. If you listen to Lamar Jackson talk, he's a phenomenal athlete. There's no doubt about that. He's got a lot of work to do. He's got a lot of work to do if he's going to be an NFL quarterback. He's very like Michael Vick-like in the sense that, Michael Vick was not a terrible quarterback. You can't say Michael Vick was a terrible quarterback. It's also hard to say that he was a great quarterback. He was a phenomenal athlete who was an okay quarterback. So we'll see what happens with Lamar Jackson. Interesting choice by the Baltimore Ravens. Danny Woodhead is out. I mentioned that. Only 56 yards rushing, was more of a receiving threat. And Terrence West is also gone. He had a really good rookie year in 3rd season, but last year he only had 138 yards in 5 games with 3.5 yards per carry. So that just didn't really warrant bringing him back when he's falling down the depth chart. At wide receiver, Mike Wallace, I mentioned, pretty big name, led the team in yards, receiving yards. Number 1 wide receiver, gone, went to Philadelphia. Jeremy Maclin, number 2 wide receiver, gone. Michael Campanaro, gone. Okay, Campanero's gone. So he was your number 4 wide receiver. That is most of your receiving core. The 3 of your top 4 wide receivers gone. So what did you do to try to replace that? How are you going to try to rebuild these receiving core? Well, for number 1, you were able to pick up Michael Crabtree, which was, you kind of lucked into that because what happened was the Ravens had signed another wide receiver, But then they end up voiding his contract because of his physical. They said he failed his physical. And then after that happened, Oakland signed Jordy Nelson and then let Michael Crabtree go. And the Ravens were promptly like, thank you very much, we'll take Michael Crabtree. So that is a good pickup for the Ravens to get Michael Crabtree. He's not young. You can see his numbers started to drop off last year. He had 1,000 yards in 2016, 922 yards in 2015, with 8+ touchdowns. And then last year his numbers dropped off to 618 yards, and he's going to be 31 years old. So that is, are you picking him up as he's finally starting to drop off? Are you getting him at the tail end of his career? How much left does Michael Crabtree have? We'll see. You also signed the Ravens also signed John Brown, who is the number 4 wide receiver with the Cardinals last year. You can see that last year he only had 299 yards in 10 games, but in 2016 he had 500 yards. And in 2015, he had 1,000 yards. So, is he going to be able to have a bounce-back year? Or is he also kind of done? Willie Snead was the number 4 wide receiver there in New Orleans. Jaleel Scott was picked up in the 4th round. Jordan Lasley was picked up in the 5th round. And then finally, you have DeVere Posey, who was a reserve wide receiver. I don't know, you rebuilt your wide receiving core, but there's a lot of question marks there. You got some guys who have had good years in the past, but are these guys that can still make a big difference now? I don't know. Ben Watson is gone. He had a good season, 61 catches, 522 yards, but he's also ancient by NFL standards. But you drafted Hayden Hurst in the 1st round and Mark Andrews in the 3rd round. So, in the long term, depending on how it goes, that'll probably be an upgrade. But I don't think it's going to be an upgrade next season. Is Hayden Hurst going to get 522 yards next year? 60 catches in his rookie season? I don't know. But certainly in the long run, hopefully that, it's an upgrade over a guy who's about to be 40, right? At tackle, Austin Howard is out. He was the starting right tackle last season. Orlando Brown was drafted in the 3rd round. Greg Senat was drafted in the 6th round. Austin Howard wasn't great, but he was serviceable. He got the job done. So I don't see this as an upgrade, but it'll depend on how Orlando Brown ends up doing. His father, of course, was a very famous NFL player. Cameron Lee comes in at guard. He's been a practice squad player most of his career. Ryan Jensen is out, as we mentioned, at center. They've drafted Bradley Bozeman in the 6th round. So overall, the Ravens have a plan for their offensive line. And in this video, all we're doing is talking about how has the roster changed. What players are not going to be around this season that were on the team last year, and what new players do they have. We will have another video at the end of the preseason that breaks down their final, roster. So, the Ravens have some decent guys on the offensive line, but they lost a couple of important guys, both Austin Howard and Ryan Jensen. And the guys they brought in, I don't think are as good as the guys that are leaving. But they do have some good guys. They do have some quality players on the offensive line. On the defense, they drafted Zach Seiler, in the 7th round. So they've got Seiler coming in. I don't know if he's going to be a big difference maker this year, but they didn't lose anybody important on the defensive line. At linebacker, Kenny Young, they drafted in the 4th round. For a team that plays a 3-4 defense, you need young, fresh blood every year at linebacker. So they brought in Kenny Young in the 4th round. At cornerback, they drafted Anthony Averett in the 4th round. And then at safety, they lost Lardarius Webb, who was a backup safety and also, contributed some in the slot. They brought in Kai Nakua. He was a backup last year. And they also brought in Deshaun Elliott by drafting him in the 6th round. So, when you look at the team this year, all right, which players are a big upgrade from last season? Lamar Jackson's not going to win the starting job. At running back, they don't have any new guys, but I don't think this is a big loss. They brought back the most important guys at running back. At wide receiver, Michael Crabtree, is he going to be able to do better than 748 yards? That's what Mike Wallace had last season. I don't think so. He can probably match what Mike Wallace did last year, but I don't know if he can exceed it at his age. Will John Brown do better than what Jeremy Maclin did last season? 440 yards? Maybe. That might be possible. Can Willie Snead do better than what Campanaro did? Maybe. I don't see this, honestly, as a huge upgrade at wide receiver. I really don't. At tight end, in the long term, yeah. In the short term, I don't know. On the offensive line, did they upgrade? On defense, did they upgrade? I don't think this was a great offseason for the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens had a good team already. They had a good defense already. But were they a Super Bowl caliber team already? Obviously not. This is a team that will be fighting for a playoff spot. They maybe could win their division. Although, it's hard to see if they could beat the Steelers for the division. Maybe, but I don't know. The Browns are going to be looking good this season. Call me crazy. But, the Ravens are a potential playoff team, but not a team that I can see that's going to be able to beat the Patriots, the Jaguars, or maybe the Steelers in the playoffs. So, we'll see. I don't see a lot of players that they've really upgraded on this roster compared to last season. And we'll have to see what they do. If you like this video, click subscribe, because we are going to have some great videos in the coming weeks. At the end of the preseason, we are going to break down the final rosters of all 32 teams. And then before each week, we're going to preview the upcoming week's games. And then in addition, after all the games are over, we're going to review each of the teams and how they performed in the game. So definitely click subscribe, because we are going to have some of the best coverage of the NFL anywhere on YouTube. Thanks so much.